Okay, for our site plan, the final product of the site plan, you will have a sample of what the file should look like. It'll be on Teams or on one of the shared drives, OneDrive. So this is one of the samples that I want you to use. And by now, you should have seen a recording already to explain bearings and distances. You should have seen a recording to explain easements, and a separate video, if I'm not mistaken, to show you how to get the setbacks. Because remember, the setbacks are different depending on the zoning. So, and this is another example that I'll have, and this is a real life example that I did for my brother-in-law. I did a site plan for him when we did a covered patio extension for his house. And if you're kind of curious about it, I can tell you, explain why this is actually outside the setbacks, which can be done in some cases. You just have to ask the city, but nonetheless, that is an actual site plan that I've done in real life. So we are going to do it in Revit, and for Revit, you're going to start on the site plan view. You're going to go to the site plan view, and the plot I'm going to use in this example. Remember that you get to pick any lot that you want, and I do want everybody to use a different lot. I don't want anybody to use the same lot because you can essentially copy each other, and I don't want that. So I want everybody to use a different lot, and please do not use the one that I'm going to use, which is this one right in here. Why this one? It's just because it has a little bit of an arc. It doesn't have to be that one. You can pick any one of these other lots if it's rectangular. If you want a bigger lot like one of these, you're more than welcome to, or any other subdivision plat. We do have 5 or 6 of them on the folders. So once again, I'm going to be using this one for the example. Okay, to accomplish that, you're going to go over to the site plan view, and on the site plan view, you should be able to see the roof of the house and probably the site itself, the grass and all that stuff, the dirt. The thing though is that I really don't need that. So as always, you always want to make and you don't always want to, but in this case I do. I want to leave this one alone, so I'm going to make a duplicate view. And on that duplicate view, I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it my site plan. On this site plan is the one I'm going to start adjusting. For now, I don't want to really see the roof. So I'm going to take, well, not for now, it's actually part of the final document. I don't want to see the roof. So I'm going to right click and hide the roof. There's a couple of other things here that I don't want to see, like these things are right in here. I'm going to hide in view, and I'm going to hide just those elements because these might be detail lines. Now I don't want to hide all my detail lines, so I'm just going to hide those elements. And I guess this one here I don't want to see either because it's outside the building footprint. There we go. And I guess this one here, that symbol looks a little weird to be honest with you, but nonetheless, I'm going to hide those elements. Okay. Oh, and this one right in here. Select, right click, hide in view, element. Okay. And then I'll hatch it in a little bit. For now, I don't want to see these either. These are the little elevation markers. So I'm going to hide those. I am going to hide that category. And the topo surface, well, I guess I'll leave it here for now. I'll show you how we're going to adjust it a little bit later in this video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing in the bearings and distances, or really the lot, okay? And remember that as far as the lot, it's going to be this information here for this one in particular, because this is the one that I'm using. I'm going to use this information, and don't forget that because of the fact that the way the plot is drawn, sometimes you have to flip the direction. Okay, so you have to kind of pay attention to that. That's usually the hardest part of this whole exercise, is the bearings. And of course, this one has a bearing too. It's just that it's part of this line, so we'll have to kind of scroll down on this one, and then the bearing is the chord distance and the chord bearing of this one arc is the one that we're going to be using. Okay, so let me go back over here. Move this guy out of the way. So the way we're going to do that, we're going to go to masking and site, and we're going to use this property line command. And it does give us some options on how do we want to create the property line. Of course, in this case, and most of the time, if you can, you're going to enter with bearings and distances. So you're going to use bearings and distances. We have them already there. That's part of this subdivision plat, Cimarron Sky Unit 2. So I have a copy of this plat, and I'm going to go by bearings and distances. So then we're going to start entering this data. And for no reason in particular, I'm just going to start at this point right in here. I'm going to go in this direction. So I'm going to start at this point, draw these 3 lines, and then this one arc. And here we go with the first line, in that I'll tell you right now, I need to flip the direction, because southeast, if I look at my north arrow, southeast will actually be headed in this direction. and I want to go opposite of southeast. I'm going to go in this direction, so I need to flip the direction to go northwest, 863210, a distance of 112.90. So my first line, I'm going to go the distance, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the decimal distance. I'm going to go northwest. I'm going to flip the direction, and then as far as the bearing, I'm going to type it in with an 86 space 32 space 10, enter. So that puts in my bearing in the northwest direction. So that's my first line, and then I'm going to click insert to insert a second line. The second line will be this one at 7803. The bearing will be northeast. Is it headed in the northeast direction? If I'm headed from here this way, it sure is. So I need to go in that direction, northeast. So that's bearing 3 space 27 space 50. So 3 degrees, 27 minutes, 50 seconds. A distance of 7803. Don't forget that the distance of this lot, the entire line is 525, 524.40 for the boundary, but this one lot along that bearing is 7803. So I'm going to go in here 7803 northeast. Excellent. And then I have this other line that's southeast, 6942.43. It does seem to be headed in a southeast direction, so I'm going to deal with the southeast. 69 degrees, 42 minutes, 43 seconds. Distance of 107.75. Okay. And then just to tell you this, if I were to just close it, it would add this line here, okay, to close it. But I don't. Basically, it would assume what that last line would be, but I don't want that last line. What I want is an arc, and I need to look at the information of C60. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to insert the last one, and that one is going to be an arc. Okay, now we need to type in the radius, bearing, and distance. So for C60, we need to go look at that bearing, distance, and radius. Okay, for C60, we need to look at this information here. And if you're curious what this is, please ask me. But nonetheless, what we're going to be using is the chord bearing, and the radius. Okay, for C60, we have a radius of 50 feet is the radius. I'm going to go back over here and type in 50. And then my bearing, let's go back to the plat, C60, has a bearing of northwest 81757, northwest. Okay. Let me do this on purpose. I'm going to do this wrong to show you how to fix it. And that it really shouldn't be northwest. I'll tell you right now, it should be southeast, but I'm going to leave it northwest just to show you how something can be done wrong. But it's really just literally flipping the direction and how to fix it after the fact. So I'm going to put it northwest 81757. 81757. And then it has a chord distance of, let me just verify I'm looking at the right one. Yes, I am. It has a chord distance of 4785. 4785. Okay. Now, if I would have done this correctly, by now, it should have said, right here, the little message should have said closed. Okay. But it's not. And I already did the 4. So let me go ahead and hit OK and show you what's wrong with it. Oh, and then the radius, the arc, I'll explain that next. Hit OK. And then I'm going to place it. I'm just going to place it off to the side over here. Click. Okay. A lot of you guys freak out when you see this. Oh my God, this is wrong. Let me hit escape and start all over again. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to get out of that habit. We don't have to start all over again. All it says, it just doesn't form a closed loop. So there's no area because it's not closed. So I'm going to leave that there, and then notice what's wrong with it. This arc is headed in the wrong direction. It should have headed in a southeasterly direction, which is opposite of what the chord bearing says right over here in C60. It says northwest. I should have gone southeast. So to fix it, I'm going to select the line. After I hit escape, I'm going to edit the table. And on this table, and again, we also need to make sure we're understanding how to flip the direction. Don't just go and change north to south. because now I have southwest, and that's going to be even worse. Okay, so please be careful that whenever you're flipping the directions, we flip the direction. If it's not northwest, which we already know is wrong, that's how I did it to begin with, we're going to go opposite of northwest. The opposite of northwest is southeast. I'm going to switch over from north to south, and then west to east. And notice now it says closed. That's exactly what I needed to see. Okay. Now, as far as the arc, I didn't change it because it defaulted to a right. It just depends which way you're traveling. And I can tell you right now, it's kind of weird, but we're traveling this way is the way I drew the bearings and distances. So because of the way we're traveling this way, according to the plat, when we're traveling this way, according to Revit, this actually curves to the right. Okay. So again, it's almost like if you're standing here looking, that's a horrible face, but nonetheless, looking in this direction. So that'll be to the right of you. So that's how it understands the right or left. If that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, just flip right to left and that will fix it if that doesn't make sense to you. Just to show you what that would look like. Okay, and you can right away see that it's just not correct. Select that one and go back to right. Okay, and it does say closed. All right, very good. So at this point, this is where it's going to start getting interesting. And what we want to do now is we need to orient the lot. In other words, if you look at the house on the plat, eventually the house is going to be facing in this direction to the house. You want it to be facing the street. So when the house needs to be oriented this way to where the front of the house is looking to the center of the street. That's the way you want to orient the house. Okay. The thing though is that if you look at the Revit model, the house is actually the front of the house is actually on this direction over here. So do we rotate the entire house? No, that's a big no. We do not do that. So what we're gonna do is kind of weird. It's let me go to a 3D view just to show you. Okay, so this is the front of the house here, and I'm gonna click on top. And notice where the north is at right now. This is what we usually call Project North. It's just facing north in this direction, and that's just because that's where we started the project. But in this case now, we want to put some reality to it because if you notice, where is north pointing? It's pointing up in this direction, but the lot is facing this way. So what I want to do, it's almost like if I want to rotate the entire lot to get it to face in this direction. And with that being said, then look at the way north is pointing. So that's different than it is on our project. So that's what we need to rotate. And even this right here isn't exactly the way I want it. I want it to be a little bit more centered. I'm going to draw like a little line for reference here in a little bit, but let me show you how we're going to do that. Counterclockwise. Okay. So the way we're going to do that, it's on the side plan view over here. I'm going to draw, and I could align it with this. I can, I guess there's so many ways of doing this, and there's no right or wrong. It's just a personal preference. I could align this edge of the line with this edge of the house, and then the thing is, I'd have to get the angle between these two, and consider that angle for my rotation. Okay, and I do need a decimal degree angle. But what I'm gonna do is I want to kind of center it, so I'm gonna draw a line from the midpoint here to the midpoint here, and I'm going to use, and it doesn't have to be this line, it could be this one. They're all parallel anyways. I want to get the angle between this line and this line. That's the angle I'll need to then rotate the north. So I'm going to rotate the entire, it's almost like if we're saying we're going to rotate the entire world, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So for now, I'm just going to temporarily draw myself a line. I'm going to go over here and draw myself a temporary detail line. Doesn't really matter what style. I'll just go with hidden, I guess. And I'll draw myself a line from the midpoint here to the midpoint here, right there. Okay. So I'm going to use that for reference. I'm going to give myself an angular dimension between this, between any of these walls, this wall here and this wall here. I give myself an angular dimension, 77.17 degrees. Okay. So now that I know my angle, you need to be able to see this little marker here. And I'm not sure what this marker is called, but I will tell you it's kind of like a UCS origin. Well, I guess it is called a project base point. If I select it, don't double click on it, just kind of click on it once. And you'll notice that it says north, south, east, and west. It's almost like your 000 XYZ, like your UCS in AutoCAD. But this is what I'm trying to adjust, the angle to true north. Right now it's at 0. So this is where I'm going to plug in this number, and I always forget whether it's negative or positive. So I'm just going to start with a positive number of 77.17, enter. And notice that it's going to rotate the entire lot, okay? But it rotated it in the wrong direction. I want it the other way. So that should be a negative 77.17. There we go. Okay. Notice this line didn't change. It's just because the fact that this thing is rotating, the reason it's rotating is because, let me just show you on 3D. It's actually rotating the north. Look at that. The house didn't change. The house didn't rotate. It's almost like we rotated the entire world. And this is one of the only times that the world will revolve around you. Most of the time, it's the other way around. And that's my joke of the day. So we're going to go back to the site plan view. And this is now oriented correctly. It's almost like if I took this plat, like I took the north, which is referencing Earth and all that stuff, and I rotated it. So that's essentially what I did, but I didn't rotate it at 90 degrees. I rotated it 77.17 degrees. But that's what I'm doing. So you see the north is pointing towards that direction. All right. So now that I have that, I'm going to move, and I can delete this line. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to rotate this guy. I'm sorry, move it. And then I'm going to start drawing in the rest of the information. What's the rest of the information? Well, I did mention that we are going to follow these samples. So the rest of the information for now, I'm going to start with the setbacks because I want to start putting the house on the setbacks. Once I have the house oriented correctly, I'm going to draw in my driveway, sidewalks. Don't forget to put the easements. You find the easements on the plats. Does this one in particular have an easement? It sure does. It's along the front. Remember that each house could potentially have different kinds of easements. So it just depends on what that plat has in particular. So in this case, I'm just going to draw in, and I'm going to make up these setbacks. I don't know what the setbacks would be in particular. I'm just going to pretend that they're 20-foot setbacks front and back and 5 foot on the sides. Once again, you need to get the correct ones in the zoning for your house in particular. So I'm going to go with detail lines. I'm going to draw those in as hidden lines, and I'm going to pretend it's a 5-foot offset. And I'm going to click on here. And there's my offset. I'm going to click the space bar to move it to the inside to go to this endpoint right there. And then from this point to this point right there. And then I'm going to, once again, pretend that it's a 20-foot offset, front and back. So I'm going to draw this one. I'm sorry, setback, right there. And then my arc, the 20-foot is going to start at this point and at this point, and it's going to be on that point there. All right. Using my trim command, I want to trim these lines to start showing the conceptual setbacks. So now I want to put the house towards the front of the setback. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the property line, press and hold the control button, and select my setbacks, because that way I can move everything all at the same time. Because remember, if I just move the property line, then my setbacks don't move at the same time, but I do need that to happen. So I'm going to select this setbacks, and then I'm going to start moving them, okay? I hate to say it, but you can kind of eyeball it where you could put it right at the setback. If I wanted to, I can actually grab the setback here and just put it right into that line. I'm wondering if I can using my move command, move it from the nearest point, there it is, or intersection, to that endpoint right there, and it puts it right on that setback. I'm going to temporarily turn off the line weights, type in TL, and the thick lines, TL, goes away. You notice it's right on the setback, and that's what you want to do. And it doesn't have to be that way. As long as the house is anywhere within the setbacks, that'll work. I'm going to type in TL to put in my line widths again. Okay. And that'll work for me. This is pretty much, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm happy with this. But again, you can rotate it as you want. And as long as the house is within the setbacks, that's all we need to do. So many other things that we need to do. We can start drawing in the region. We do need a field region. We're going to go with a probably diagonal up, and we're going to type in the region. I'm going to select pick lines, and just going to pick lines all the way around of the house. And I'm picking the wrong one, so let me start that again. Region, fill region, diagonal up, and I can use the pick lines option. I just want to make sure I'm picking the walls themselves, and it keeps picking that line right there, right there. I'll have to come back and delete that line. There we go. I'm going to delete that line there and hit check. So that's my fill region. Once again, I'm trying to copy a plan, which is this one right in here. You notice that the residence is a region. A couple of other things I'll show you is how to put in the dimensions. This one shows feet and inches. On my site plan view, it's, well, that's kind of a personal preference, but let's just say you have an engineer and architect who tells you it wants it in decimal feet. So let me show you how to do that in our dimensions, because we need to start placing our dimensions from the property line to the house. And that's why I want to avoid feet and inches, because of the fractions. So to go into decimal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own style. So I'm going to go to edit type. Should be the linear 3/32 Arial. Okay, we have different ones, but I just want to use that one there. And I'm going to make my duplicate one. And on that duplicate, I'm going to call it decimal. Hit OK. And on that decimal, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change the units format of the decimal. Right now it's in feet and inches. I'm going to change that decimal. I'm going to take off the project settings. I'm going to change this over to decimal to feet, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places right in here. And then I'm going to put a unit symbol of a foot, the little foot mark at the end. Okay. Another thing too is we need to leave it the text size at 3/32. A lot of you guys have seen this text and said, "Oh, Mister, it's too big," and you start adjusting the size of the text. That should not happen. And I realize that that could potentially be the case to make it smaller. Let me make sure I think I hit change that over to decimal. There it is. And it makes it smaller, but that's not really what we want to do. We want to make sure we leave that text height at 3/32. Okay. What makes it bigger or smaller is our scale. So it's not until we start adjusting the scale that will make the text bigger or smaller. What scale are we going to use? And you see that? So it all depends on the scale. What scale are we going to use? Well, that depends on how and when we create the sheet, which we need to do that at one point. So let me go ahead and create a new sheet. C size arch, hit OK. So that's going to be our new sheet. And then I'm going to take that side plan view, drag and drop it onto the sheet and fit it on there. You notice this scale is way too big, so I'm going to make that smaller. You pick the scale that fits, and you want to fill up the sheet as much as possible. Typical site plan is usually like a 1:10. Um, yeah, we can actually probably go a little bit bigger, 1/8. There we go. That should actually work pretty good. It fits it all in there very good. Notice the size of the text changed, and that's exactly what we want to do. Okay. On the next video, I'm going to show you how to start drawing in the I'm going to put in a fence and the driveway, and hopefully finish up this site plan on the next video.